Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Let me thank you, the organizers, for this timely venue and allow me to address you at the crossroads of known, less known, and unknown developments in many countries, old and new blocs, and civilizations. As you may know, the government of Italy is an unbearable pressure from migration. Those are the words of Prime Minister Meloni, asking the EC to assist, and at the same time hoping that the human rights in European understanding could be maintained and applied even in those difficult and complex situations. At the same time, we can observe in Ukraine that the special military operation, as I call it, as the war these days, doesn't need to be declared in the traditional way. The situation demonstrates clearly that the respect for human rights cannot be protected at all in times of crisis. We have to understand that we have been living in times of crisis and will be living in times of crisis for a long time. Why? Short answer is we have been applying non-organic reforms. We have been living with materialistic values, generally against the law of nature, and consume have been determining our life. At the conference in Vienna in 2019, I basically confirmed that the European Convention on Human Rights is an international convention to protect human rights and political freedoms in Europe. But at the same time, I said that the ECHR is outdated, and today, when considering the current irreversible changes of values of civilization, the ECHR is for me even dead. In this short address, I will argue that the key characteristics of the human rights stand for a fundamental human rights whose protection cannot be absolute. Why the protection of human rights cannot be absolute? I say only four main reasons. First, the historical background. The second, the language aspect and the fact of formulation in broad terms. The third reason, the fact of non-resolvable contradictions. And the fourth, the non-scientific origin of human rights concepts. Those who are competent in science would know that there is something like pathological science. This is the terminus technicus formulated by Irving Lungmeyer, Nobel Prize laureate from the 30s. Further to this, I want to mention that the ECHR autonomous interpretation, allowing a protection much wider in scope than the protection under national law, lead practically to limitations of national sovereignty. The question is, cui bono? In general way, we can say, or I say usually, ECHR stands for a play with words. In Chinese, you have also two words which I interpret as the beauty. In the beauty, there is a deficit. deficit in understanding the fundamentals in relations between the East and the West, and as it seems, which grows day by day. I learned something about the history of the 19th century and of the deep economic crisis, which objectively leads to the rise of China and its role in the globalization. This begs the question, what are the causes of the decline of the Western world and the Western civilization? Why did not only I see the phenomenon that the salvation of any civilization has its roots in a strong power and strength? What determined my personal and early worldview? In my case, it could be the view on the medicine, it could be the 5 stay at the European Commission, it could be also my duty as a service to 2 prime ministers. In this case, and for this seminar, I did select a brief history of Russian philosopher, monarchist, and also diplomat, Konstantin Nikolaevich Leontiev. He lived from 1831 till 1891. That means only 60 years. Once by his confrontation with French consul, who in his present criticized Russian, Leontiev, without engaging in argument, simply struck the consul in the face with a whip. Didn't discuss, didn't make a diplomatic notes and complain. Basically, it proved that the punishment sometimes is much effective, ecological, and efficient than any diplomatic words. And at the same time, also, he answered the question, cui bono? And wondering, his behavior didn't bring him punishment from the Tsar and from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Even he was moved to a much better place abroad. Very important issue in regard to the human rights is related to the problematic of Slav. Slavism is and Slavism isn't. This is a terminus technicus also formulated by Leontiev. And it means basically the absence of a unified Slavic ideology. And also the question, what is Slavophilism? And could there be any great Russian question? The current military confrontation on the Ukraine territory and the Dostoevsky statement prove Russia will not have and never has had such haters, envious, slanderers, and even obvious enemies as all these Slavic tribes. This is a very important statement, which basically proves the current situation in the Czech Republic, in Poland, and the rest of the Ukraine. And this also proves that the concept, the European concept of human rights is in principle dead. In connection with this Slavic question, one should not forget the so-called Eastern question. The Eastern question first became acute at the end of 18th century. It was characterized by the growing role of Russian Empire and the Middle East. As a result of the wars with the Ottoman Empire, the military political success contributed to the awakening of the national consciousness of Balkans people and spread the idea of the liberation movement among them. Balkan is even today another problem which people ignore. So basically, there is a need to ask, has the Eastern question really been eliminated or not? In my personal opinion, not. It has not been eliminated. It plays a very significant role in today's political discourse. We have then, as a consequence, to ask about Europe, the engine of everything that happens in history and which is dying. Why? I give very brief reasons which I think are the problems of Europe and why we are here in the process of dying. First, it is the egalitarianism. That is the equality of rights and opportunities which does not exist in nature. It cannot exist, therefore, anthropologically. This is very important if you want to talk as a scientist or whatever, not only as a politician. This is, therefore, for me, the long-term disease of Europe. You can recall the history of French Revolution, and you will be able to come to the conclusion that this is the beginning of the end of European civilization. The second reason I usually consider is the never-lasting and never-ending try to be happy and well-being of the individual as a supreme achievement of the entire life. This is a quite ridiculous attitude and perception. It is therefore a convulsive effort that embraces all people but have no result. And the third object of my criticism of Europe is the individualism. A man who fights for only himself, for his own benefit, either within the concept of law, nevertheless destroys the civilization and make all people the same. Sex in all forms, sadness in different forms, and depression with negative stress cannot be or cannot offer a happy life. It is therefore the anthropological degradation when there is no exceptional personality or heroism. If you look briefly at China, in the past and in the present, we can basically state following. Social order and harmony can be pursued by affirming and protecting people's interest in security, material goods, social relationships, and fair treatment. On these issues, there is no incompatibility between, for instance, Confucius and the general concept of human rights in Europe. But if we go deeper and look, for instance, at the ethical teaching in China, then we see already differences. I will not elaborate on details in this case, but want to say that there is a very important question to be asked. Can we in fact find in China today a distinctive conception of rights? Do we consider the last century, including the period before and after the establishment of People's Republic of China in 1949? do we really try our best to find more about the rights discourse in the old China and consider Confucius not a teaching as one of a few other teachings? We have to also accept that the European Convention of Human Rights relates explicitly to politics, effective political democracy, and the belief that the rule of law stands for a precondition for peaceful cohabitation of peoples and states. Ideas of the European Convention of Human Rights were based on the strongest traditions of UK, France, and other member states of the Council of Europe, but not on Asian or Chinese strongest traditions. Therefore, the Eastern concepts and the Western concepts are different. Those who are involved in analytical work would accept that a concept is a very messy issue. This is not so easy as it may sound. So therefore, the question is, what makes the difference between concepts? And here I can recall Chinese Excellency Mr. Li, head of Chinese delegation in Vienna, who 30 years ago, in 93, said something which I put somewhere here, I don't know, it will come, the citation. But generally, it means that from the philosophical and religious point of view, we can also quote a gospel. My strength is perfect in weakness, and the famous command of Jesus Christ. The kingdom of heaven is taken by force. Think not that I have come to bring peace to earth. I have not come to bring peace, but a sword. Those are words, from the Bible. Therefore, it was not difficult, or it is not difficult to predict all these current problems, conflicts, and also the probable or the predictable or the outcome of our problems, confrontation. The last what I want to mention is here just there is something like a symphony of civilizations and rapprochement. Also, these two words, symphony of civilizations, is nothing more than a definition made by Leontiev. Today, you have been using it and name it multipolar world. Nothing new. Everything has been said many, many years and 100 years ago. So the rapprochement also between East and West, including the Muslim world, could be possible when Europe got rid of his insane self-confidence and accepts that creators of the European culture were not some nameless masses and processes, but people with exceptional talents, kings, and knights. Therefore, at the end of this short address, I mentioned, or it is here already somewhere, yes, the CDA. There is a need to change our educational system. People has to be re-educated and understand different issues. The principles of a radical change in education, I basically recall as adopting a systemic approach of individual abilities that facilitate ecologically, efficiently, and economically, how to define challenges and opportunities under uncertainties and manage the associated changes. Basic change, process of change involves finding the quality of the state today, the ideal case in the future, and define the delta between. Last but not least, I would like to mention that the CDA involves a very important issue, the linguistic archetypes, the psychological and the creative, and which both basically the triangle forms also the ability to manage internal and external stress. In Chinese language, the Chinese language is linguistically analytic and isolating. Word units do not change because of inflection, idioms, or allusions from traditional Chinese culture. It can be also said, therefore said, that the Chinese concepts are Chinese own, the Western concepts are Western own, and the East concepts are Eastern. Let me close also with the words of Konstantin Rerich. The last war between men will be a war for truth. This war will be in every person. War with one's own ignorance, aggression, irritation. And only a radical transformation of each individual can become the beginning of a peaceful life for all people. And the Chinese, they have a much shorter proverb. A hut of straw in which people laugh is worth more than a palace in which people cry. Thank you very much for your attention.